everybody. Welcome to the No BS Zone. I'm Bernie Goldberg, and my friend in Colorado is John Daly. How you doing, John?
I'm good. How about you, Bernie?
Good. We're going to have a special segment about Mr. Daly goes to Washington later in our show. I want to begin with a column that I wrote that basically asks this question: what do Trump supporters want from the media? Maybe calling them Trump supporters was too broad. I'm willing to acknowledge that. What I really was asking is, what do the Trump most loyal supporters want from the media? What do the MAGA faithful want from the media? So during his first month in office, Donald Trump said the United States sent $50 million in condoms to Hamas. Diversity programs caused the plane crash. China controls the Panama Canal, and Ukraine started the war with Russia. None of that is true. So I'm asking my friends who are loyal Trump supporters, not Trump supporters in general, but the MAGA faithful, what do you want me to do about that? Should the media ignore those stories because they make Donald Trump, honestly, they make him look bad? Or because Trump is better than Biden, so we should ignore those stories? What do you want from us? That's my question. I think I know the answer, but even when I said that in the column, I got hit by one of our readers saying, "Oh, you think you know what we want?" Yeah, I do think I know what you want, you MAGA faithful supporters. I think I do. I think you want nothing but good things said about Donald Trump because you do think he's better than Joe Biden, and that justifies everything else. Because you think he has good intentions. He may very well have good intentions. I'm not arguing that. But journalism is supposed to be about telling the truth. Liberal journalists don't have a great track record in that regard. Shouldn't we, on the other side of that coin, conservative journalists, be better than that? Shouldn't we tell the truth even when it isn't flattering to Donald Trump? I think the answer is yes, of course, yes. But again, we got a lot of reaction from the column. Maybe we'll get more from this. What do you think, John?
Well, I think you made an important. You did a good job of distinguishing between Trump supporters and Trump loyalists. There's obviously overlap, but I sort of think of Trump supporters as people who voted for Donald Trump, and Trump loyalists are the kind who reflexively defend him on anything and everything and refuse to hold him to any of the standards they hold other people to. I don't think the loyalists honestly care much about truth and honesty, because if they did, they wouldn't be Trump loyalists. Why? Because Trump lies all the time and they don't care. What those people want from the media, I think, as you do, it sounds like Trump cheerleading, Trump fandom, and the demonization of his political opponents, both real and perceived. And we have some readers, as you mentioned, who get very angry with you and me because we don't reliably supply those things. If we did, frankly, we'd have 10 times the number of subscribers we currently do. But that's not what we're about. As for the type of Trump supporter who just sees him as better than the Democrats, and that's obvious, anybody who voted for him, I think, I'm perfectly willing to believe that those people do want a fair and balanced media, but I think our country is so politically polarized that people who are news enthusiasts these days tend to be very tribal, and therefore latch on to tribal news organizations rather than seek out ones that are making a real effort to be fair and credible.
I think some of our subscribers, John, made a fair point. Why don't you say some good things about Donald Trump? Fair enough. I'm going to say a few good things now. He's trying to shut down the border and he's having what looks like some success. I applaud that. He's trying to save money and make in our federal government and make government smaller. Whether he's going too far, the courts will decide that, but I applaud his efforts to do that. If he secures something resembling peace in Ukraine and Russia, and maybe even in the Middle East. He deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. I doubt he'll get it because of the makeup of the committee that doles out those prizes. But Barack Obama got it for doing nothing. Trump ought to get it for doing something. I'm going to write about this, I think. Um, so those are a few good things, and I'm going to write about that. But in journalism, we don't talk about the bank that didn't get held up. We don't talk about the plane that didn't crash. And it's when Trump says crazy things like Zelensky started the war and he's a dictator, I have trouble writing about what a good job he's doing shutting down the southern border. Do you know what I mean, John?
Yeah,
It's
I do, and I'm glad you brought up the southern border because it's that I would list that among good things as well. Biden was disastrous, as we know, on the border. It's what people kind of should remember too. It's not just about policy because rhetoric really matters on the border. That the signals that our government sends out to the world about how easy or how hard it's going to be for them to make this long journey to try and cross the border, that stuff matters. Biden was campaigning on a lighter touch, and when he won, it didn't even take, before he even took office, people were already migrating in these huge numbers because they thought we're going to have an easier time getting in. It was worth the gamble. Trump could have come out, not changed any policy, and just rhetorically said it's going to be hell to try to get into the border, and it would have made a difference. But he has made, has put out executive actions. I would have much preferred something from Congress, so it's not immediately reversible once the next president comes into office, and if that president decides to do that. But yeah, no, I think he deserves credit for the border for sure.
but as a journalistic question, when somebody says Ukraine started the war and its president is a dictator, on the one hand, on the other hand, it says that the border is out of control and I'm going to shut it down, and is pretty much doing that. In a hard news story, they both should be mentioned. In an opinion column, I understand the criticism. I really do, and I'm not saying it's without it lacks merit. It does have merit. But what I'm saying is, if you're writing opinions and the president of the United States is saying things that's so outrageous, that somehow trumps, and I'm not trying to be smart by using the word trumps, that somehow trumps the good things he's doing, or at least cast shade on the good things he's doing. That's the reason in the first month I've written about the crazy things and not the good things. But I will write about the good things very shortly.
Yeah, his posture on Ukraine is very important because this is a huge change in American foreign policy. I mean, it's not just him coming out and saying these insane things about Zelensky and Ukraine. The U.S., it's everybody else. Pete Hegseth, um, the main foreign policy people in his administration are coming out and basically saying the same thing. They're being asked point blank, as they were Sunday, if they actually believe that Ukraine started it, and they won't answer that question. They'll just kind of gloss over it. And then there was a UN vote over the weekend too that we're recognizing the third-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That specifically said that Russia was the aggressor, or Russia was the aggressor. Russia started it. United States would sign no on that. They voted no on that. So we voted alongside the axis of evil in saying that it wasn't Russia that started this. So this is a big deal, and people are sort of, making these in Trump's defense, and I see it in our comment section too. Well, he's just negotiating. I'm like, you don't negotiate by coming in so weak on the aggressor where you don't hold them to any standard. I think this is going to end very poorly.
Some people have written, by the way, we had a lot of comments under the column, the post under the column, and they were very smart,
Yeah.
very smart. And we got a lot of them, so I appreciate that. Some people have said, I don't care what Trump says, I care about what he does. I understand that too, except words matter. And when the words are emanating from the mouth of the President of the United States, they matter a lot. So when he looks like he's throwing Zelensky and Ukraine under the proverbial bus, you think the people in Taiwan aren't paying attention to those words?
No,
You think
that's true.
our allies around the world, who might be in a tough situation, aren't paying attention to words? No, words matter. Deeds matter, but words matter too.
No, that's absolutely right. And you brought up a good point there about well, I talked a minute ago about how the border, rhetoric matters on the border. When you're the president of the United States, what he's saying, what Trump's saying on the international stage matters to situations like war. January 6th, that was created through 2 months of rhetoric that the election was stolen. And when it's funny when I hear people point that out, well, you shouldn't judge Trump by his words. They've judged those same people would rightfully judge other presidents by their words. When Joe Biden evoked Jim Crow when he was talking about the Georgia election, that was just words, but that was a huge deal. We were right to point that out, right to criticize him for it. When he said that his son Hunter had done nothing wrong, just words, but they mattered because he went back on his word on pardons. It was an outright lie by the president of the United States. When Obama told a bunch of lies about, I could say he was misinformation. I think they were lies when he was trying to sell Obamacare, just words, but words matter.
One more thing before we move on. One of our subscribers, a very smart reader of ours, one of the smart readers of ours, there are many, said, write about other subjects. I'm tired of you writing about Trump. That's another fair point, except the man's been in office for a month. It's been a whirlwind of activity, nonstop, crazy stuff. Not that he's done, but that he said. I'll get around to writing about other stuff at some point, but he's the story right now. And when Biden was president, I didn't write a lot about Trump. If you go back and check it, I wrote a lot about Biden because he was the president. So it's not like I'm obsessed with Donald Trump, but I'm a journalist and I know what the story is, and he's the story. Anyway, let's move on. The Washington Post ran a story under the headline, an analysis piece under the headline, Trump's honeymoon is over. Now, is that true or is that wishful thinking from the Washington Post? And they back up their headline, citing a number of polls that just came out this week, actually, that had Trump underwater on all the major issues except two. They had the American people not liking his policies on almost every major thing he's come out for and not liking it by a big margin. There's a problem with this. Another poll came out a few days later from Harvard and Harris, and that had the exact opposite. The Americans love what he's doing by big margins. So I don't know which is which, but I do know this. You can throw Zelensky under the bus, and that has consequences. But if you throw the American people under the bus, if you get that wrong, then no matter what you call the Gulf of Mexico, no matter what you do on the border, no matter what you do in other things, if you don't fulfill the promise you made to the American people about getting prices down, all that other stuff isn't going to matter. It isn't going to count for much or virtually anything at all, because you can't talk your way out of inflation not coming down when you said you were going to reverse this on day one, when you said prices are going to start coming down immediately. If they don't start coming down pretty soon, none of the other stuff is going to matter. That's what I think. Your take, John?
Yeah, you asked the question, or the Washington Post asked the question: is Trump's honeymoon over? I think it's getting pretty close to being over. I could certainly be wrong, and he did have that good pull over the weekend you pointed out. So, but that was actually I looked at the Real Clear Politics average, which actually factored in that really good poll. Trump's already under 50%, though he still is narrowly above water in regard to approval versus disapproval. It's a little less than 2 point margin difference there. But I think people are being reminded of who Trump is and the chaos that's surrounded a lot of his first term. He's been back in office, like you said, just a little more than a month. And in that time, he's pardoned 1,500 January 6 criminals. Most Americans did not want that. He's effectively taken Russia's side against Ukraine and much of the free world by doing that. Most Americans didn't want that. A number of his cabinet officials are either nutty or totally unqualified for their jobs. Case in point, I don't know if you saw this, Bernie Dan Bongino is now the FBI deputy director. He was named the other day. Inflation is back on the rise, and all this tariff stuff from Trump is only going to drive it higher. Hopefully, he'll change his mind on it, but I don't think he will. I think we're going to see higher prices. So yeah, people were sick of the Biden administration, and so the pendulum swung back in Trump's favor. And I think now it's going to swing in the other direction, even though I don't think the Democrats are doing much to ingratiate themselves to the public. But I think it will. Voters will be looking for an alternative again.
Since you brought up Dan Bongino, let me say a few words about that. And I haven't thought this through, so bear with me. This is real time thinking out loud. I didn't like Dan Bongino. I thought he was a blowhard. I thought he was unsophisticated. I'm not saying he wasn't smart, but just a rough street kind of guy. And when I heard that he was named deputy director, I said, what? And then I immediately said, oh, yeah. He was the guy on Fox News. And there are more than 20 people from Fox News associated with Fox News one way or another who are part of the Trump administration. And you say, Donald Trump, stable genius that he is, what is he thinking? I'm going to answer this before anybody says, Bernie, you're so naive asking this question. Is loyalty everything to this man? Is loyalty? And the answer is yes, of course. But Dan Bongino to the FBI, is there nobody in a country of 330 million people you could have picked, Mr. President, who would be better than a guy who wears a T-shirt with slogans on it and says provocative things to be provocative? And now he's saying, well, I'm not the right-wing talk person anymore. I'm the deputy director of the FBI. What was the right-wing talk thing? An act? Because that's what people want on cable TV? I don't know. If you want to say something, be my guest. Otherwise,
I think you're right. The loyalty thing is the top reason for a lot of these individuals. TV presence is a big one too. Media presence. Dan Bongino has that. He has the angry, own the libs personality that Trump likes, and yeah, I mean, so many of these people, so many of these individuals, Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., they should not be in these positions. And the Republican Party in the Senate they know that. Most senators understand that, but they're cowardly and they don't want to be primaried in their next election, so they went along with it. And I think it's going to be a big problem for us as a country.
You may be right, and we don't know yet. I think you'll acknowledge that. He's been in office about a month. I'm willing to say, let's see how this turns out. If it turns out well, I'll be the first. Listen, let me make something clear. I want this president to succeed. I want the stuff that he's doing within reason to be successful. Our next topic is DOGE, so I'm going to segue to that by saying I want DOGE to be successful. As I said earlier, I don't know if he's going too far. The courts will decide that. But I applaud Donald Trump for trying to make government more efficient, more responsible to people, smaller, less costly. Now, I understand that unless you tackle Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the Pentagon, what you save is going to be a rounding error in the big scheme of things. Okay, 50 billion, if that's what it turns out to, is 50 billion. It ain't 2 trillion. That was a big mistake Musk made, because now anything less than 2 trillion, and it won't reach 2 trillion, but anything less than 2 trillion will be labeled a failure by liberals in the media and Democrats. But I want to make clear, I'm glad he's trying these things. I hope it works. If it does, I'll write many columns about how Trump says stupid things but does great things. We'll see.
Yeah, so in the spirit of DOGE, I'm a small government conservative. I like the idea of identifying government waste and eliminating it, and DOGE is doing some of that. But a lot of people on the right, I think, are grossly overstating its effect. DOGE is cutting, as you mentioned, a tiny little percentage of the budget, and they're doing it in a very haphazard, chaotic way. The word efficiency is in that acronym. I'm not sure this what we're seeing is efficiency. I think it's a lot of Elon Musk's declarations about DOGE's findings have been outright false. You brought up one earlier with the condoms thing. There have been all kinds of math errors in the reports, including millions being confused with billions. The DOGE department at this point can't even decide who's in charge of it because there's legal challenges coming. A lot of what's happening, there's lawsuits being filed, I think may be illegal. So I think a lot of this stuff is not going to even go through. There are serious conflict of interest issues, I think, and there appears to be no oversight. There's examples of people mistakenly being fired and then having to be rehired because it wasn't clear what they were doing. Turns out, oh, they're overseeing our nuclear arsenal. Kind of a big deal. So you got to try to find these people and bring them back. I don't think, again, I think the effort is the idea is a good one. I don't think the group knows what it's doing, and I'm not sure they really care that they don't know what they're doing. All that's the big thing I think that seems to matter in all this is that it's good performance art. They think it's good politics. They have the whole chainsaw prop, and most of the right's cheering them on, and I think that's actually the big effect from all this.
This is the part that I applaud, John, despite everything you just said. They're trying to shake up, and they are shaking up the status quo. The status
That's
quo
true.
needed shaking up. Whether they succeed or not, I understand every word you said, and it's overwhelmingly true. I'm just waiting to see how it plays out. Okay. Final topic. Mr. Daly Goes to Washington. Remember the great movie with Jimmy Stewart, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington? Well, Mr. Daly just returned from Washington, D.C., where he was not meeting with Donald Trump or Elon Musk. What were you doing in Washington, John?
Yeah, so for the second year in a row, I went to the Principles First Summit in DC. It's an annual gathering of what I would call mostly Reagan conservatives, people who believe in traditional conservative principles like small government, personal responsibility, individual freedom, the rule of law, and strong national defense. It's sort of the opposite of what CPAC has become. And it's actually held on the same weekend and in the same city as CPAC by design, sort of a alternative programming. But Principles First gets a lot of speakers that I respect and admire. I find the topics interesting, and it's also just fun for me to hang out with regular people who I've gotten to know online over the years through my writing and my other commentary, some through my fiction writing. But they're just these down to earth people who love their country and worry about its future. I got people who were following the website over the weekend, and all this stuff is still out there. I interviewed Noah Rothman of National Review. I'm a big fan of his. Stephen Hayes of the Dispatch. He had very kind words to say about you, Bernie. I don't know if you watched that yet, but it just yeah, some of the speakers were very interesting. Chris Christie had some interesting things to say. David French and Russell Moore. There was, and I wanted to talk about this a bit. I know I'm carrying on a little long here, but there was some unexpected drama at the event. I should premise the story by mentioning that there were 4 January 6th police officers there as speakers. These are the guys a lot of people recognize from the January 6th hearings, and occasionally they pop up, do media appearances. You'll see them on CNN from time to time. But Michael Fanone, Harry Dunn, I'm going to say this name wrong, Aquilino Gonell, and Daniel Hodges. I actually ran into Daniel Hodges at the reception the night before the event started. It was at a pretty cool concert venue across the street. He's the cop, Bernie, you might remember, that we saw in that video of him being crushed in a door by the mob as he was trying to hold them out. Anyway, he was at the reception by himself. I don't think many people noticed him. I happened to recognize him and introduce myself. We talked for quite a while. I even got him on the Daly Express podcast, which people can listen to. He's a great guy, a little bit shy, but I personally, and I mentioned this in my writing, I feel endlessly bad for these guys. Only one of the four is still a cop. The other three left the profession. Two of them had to because of the inflictions and injuries they suffered that day, and they've been treated like garbage for the last 4 years. MAGA people hate them. They harass them in public. They threaten them and their families with violence. Donald Trump, as we know, not only escaped political accountability for that day, but he also pardoned their attackers, among a bunch of other people. Additionally, Speaker Mike Johnson is refusing to hang a plaque in the Capitol honoring their service, a plaque that had been passed through Congress. Trump has called them fake cops. So, and I know this, I'm carrying on a little bit. Let me just add one footnote to this. At the principal's first summit, the case in point with all this harassment, the former leader of the Proud Boys, Enrico Tarrio, he showed up at the hotel to harass those guys. The video is online. Tarrio was supposed to be in prison for another 20 years for seditious conspiracy for his acts at January 6th. But Donald Trump pardoned him, so he's out and about. He was actually arrested the day before at the Capitol for apparently assaulting a woman. Got out of jail that night, I guess. But anyway, the hotel incident was on Saturday, and then on Sunday, a very specific bomb threat was emailed to principals first. It had Tarrio's name on it. Whether or not it was actually him, they haven't just figured that out yet. But it was a serious threat. We were evacuated upstairs for a couple hours while cops came in with dogs and eventually gave us the all clear. One of the people mentioned in that threat was Fanone's elderly mother and her residential address. And so same with John Bolton, who was going to be a speaker there. He's already, at threat with losing his Secret Service security, and his home had to be searched too. So it was a pretty big deal. And, I enjoyed the event, but it ended not on a great note.
Generally speaking, and briefly, are these the kind of Republicans who hate Republicans?
I think these are the kinds of Republicans who hate what the GOP has become. These are the people that, like I said, were Reagan conservatives. They believe in the principles that I had mentioned up top, and what they now see is a Republican Party who stands very much on the opposite side of these things. There was a lot of people speaking out about the Ukraine situation.
Who did they vote for, by and large, do you suppose, in the last election?
Oh, I would say, well, I think I know for a fact a lot of the speakers didn't vote for either of these two. I know a couple of them voted for Kamala Harris. I think a few even probably voted for Trump reluctantly. But yeah, we didn't, when I was talking to just the regular people here, I didn't really ask many people who they voted for. But yeah, I think more people, I would guess, and I have no way of knowing this, more people in attendance probably voted for neither than voted for Kamala Harris.
What I'm getting at, John, when I see Republicans on CNN or MSNBC who don't have a good word to say about anything and support liberal and progressive causes, I just say, no, I'm not, I can't take these people seriously. And I'm just wondering if they would fit into that category of people.
There were a few of those people. So I think a lot of the people who work for the Bulwark sort of fit into that category. Some of them were there. But I think by and large, that's not the case. I mean, we had people who were perfectly willing to acknowledge certain things that Trump was doing right. It sort of ran the spectrum. You know, and then you had people. So I was sort of questioning some of the speakers. You had Mark Cuban there, who I don't think is a Reagan conservative, but I guess maybe he was just a draw. So yeah, there were a few
Kamala Harris
speakers there. I
Democrat.
was like,
He was a
what's that?
Kamala Harris Democrat.
Oh, was he? Yeah, I didn't actually stay for his speech. I was recording a podcast during. I'll take your word for it.
No, he is. He supported her during the election. All right.
Okay.
As you can see, the sun is setting on my incredibly luxurious office, which I thank my friends at ChatGPT or whatever AI program I'm using. I don't even know what it is, for this background, which is totally 100% fake. So, but the sun is setting, so it's time to go. Anything else, John?
No, I think that's it, Bernie. I'm glad to be back. I know you had a little bit of a trip yourself, and you're glad to be back as well. So, yeah,
I'm
good to
back.
be back.
I'm back in the USA. Glad to be here. All right. Until next time, we'll see all of you. And thanks so much for the comments you posted under my last column. They were by and large very intelligent and very much appreciated. Bye-bye.